Discover how an unexpected bet led a cowboy to an incredible love story that forever changed him. Tanner Wells sat alone at the bar in Cedar Creek, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. The dim light cast a shadow over him that matched the looming darkness settling over the family ranch. He could almost hear the whispers of despair echoing in his ears. Foreclosure, debts piling up, the land that had been his family's for generations slipping through his fingers. As the people around him laughed and shared stories, it felt like Tanner was stuck in a different reality, where every smile felt like a jab at his own growing desperation. A newcomer had rolled into town. Carter, a man draped in wealth and an attitude that reeked of entitlement. Tanner had loathed him upon arrival, his polished ranch a clear contrast to the mud-in-sweat toil of Tanner's upbringing. But as Tanner brooded over his troubles, the reckless idea of a bet seemed like a last-ditch escape from his turmoil. "Your ranch against mine," Carter had taunted, his voice a blend of mockery and intrigue. Tanner knew he was stepping into a trap, but didn't he care? What did he have to lose? Pride surged within him like wildfire, overpowering the voice of reason. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The mounting pressure from the bet consumed Tanner. Winning it meant more than just securing the ranch. It created a rift between him and his roots. Would people see him as just a man who gambled his family's legacy for a shot at glory? The psychological toll twisted his gut and tightened his chest as flashes of judgment crossed his mind, friends becoming strangers all around him, loyalty questioned at every turn. Then, amidst the chaos, Lila stepped into his thoughts like a sliver of warm sunlight. The schoolteacher with laughter that could melt the icy weight resting on his heart had been a steady presence, a fascination he dared not acknowledge until now. Was it even real, or just another fleeting distraction? As their paths crossed more, he couldn't shake the feeling of joy that became his escape, even when he knew it was a fragile happiness, teetering on the edge of judgment from the townsfolk. But could he fight for her? The notion seemed both exhilarating and terrifying. With each moment spent with Lila, Tanner found himself grappling with a shifting identity, caught between loyalty to family and the burgeoning feelings that enveloped him. What if the town turned against him? The very people who taught him loyalty were now watching him with guarded eyes. Would they ever believe that love could bloom under such shaky circumstances, or would they assume it was just an attempt to revel in newfound fame? Tanner was cornered, each breath weighed down by the enormity of his choices, the anticipation of the annual rodeo heightening the turmoil within. The pressure rose like steam before an explosion, creating an unbearable tension where his decisions could irrevocably change everything. Standing on the precipice of love or betrayal, he faced the haunting question: would he surrender to fear, or would he summon the courage to defy what Cedar Creek expected of him? The stakes had never been higher, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tanner felt the pull of destiny tightening around him, forcing him irrevocably closer to a truth he wasn't yet ready to confront. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Tanner's small bedroom, casting long shadows that danced across the wooden floor. It felt like the sun was mocking him, an irreverent reminder that a new day waited outside, despite the heaviness that lingered in his heart. He lay still, battling the weight of anxiety that clung to him like a second skin. Today was the day Carter had arranged to discuss the terms of their bet. Tanner could no longer ignore the urgency clawing at his insides. Doubt gnawed at him endlessly, wrestling with desperation. The ranch was not only land, it was blood and sweat, stories from his father and grandfather woven into every inch. Yet, the world outside thrummed with the promise of a life that seemed increasingly out of reach. Even Lila's laughter echoing in his mind felt like a distant echo. What was he fighting for? Shaking off the encroaching numbness, he swung his legs over the edge of the bed. The floorboards creaked underfoot, just as they always did. He needed to ground himself, to reconnect with what was real. He approached the small mirror hanging on the wall, staring into the reflection that glared back at him. The eyes looking back weren't the vibrant ones that had ridden the range a few years ago. They now carried shadows of uncertainty. He could either be the man who lost everything or the one who reclaimed his legacy. A flicker of that ancient pride ignited in him. But would it be enough? In the kitchen, the familiar creak of the door as he opened it punctuated the stillness of the house. Tanner filled a mug with coffee, the strong scent momentarily distracting him from the cold knot in his stomach. He leaned against the counter, contemplating his next steps. He needed a strategy, one that didn't involve reckless bets, but rather an approach tactically sound enough to turn the tables without losing himself. Then a thought struck him. He could appeal to the townsfolk, sharing honest plans that would benefit the community and, in doing so, showcase his commitment to the ranch and to Cedar Creek. But would it work? Would they see past the bet? He would have to confront Carter openly, not as an unyielding opponent, but as someone willing to negotiate with honor. His mind shifted toward Lila again. She had to be part of this plan. Tanner could not navigate this tumultuous sea alone, and her insight could show him angles he'd not considered. The way she spoke about literature and art brought life to even the most mundane topics. Perhaps if he invited her to join him as an ally, they could create a joint venture to foster the land as potential an educational project that infused the town with new energy while keeping his family legacy intact. When Tanner finally set out into the sun-drenched street, he felt lighter, thawing from the cold grip of his earlier despair. Each footstep was infused with newfound determination. He sought out Lila first. As he approached her modest schoolhouse, a handful of children scattered, laughing and racing past him. The joy on their faces pulled at his heartstrings, reminding him of innocence and hope. Lila appeared on the porch, her hair a gentle halo against the soft light. She held a stack of papers that she was about to distribute, but when their eyes locked, everything else faded into the background. "Hey, Tanner, you look different," she said, tilting her head as though trying to read him. "It's time for a change," he confessed, grappling with the surge of feeling that rushed to fill the space between them. Just as he opened his mouth to reveal his plan, a rumble echoed in the distance, a reminder of what was at stake. Tanner swallowed hard, steeling himself against the torrent of fear swirling within. The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the chance to shape not only his future, but Lila's as well. "Can we talk?" he finally asked, as uncertainty coiled within him once more. What would she think of his idea? Would she support him, or would she see the gamble in a different light? As the questions loomed large, the stakes had never felt higher. Would he take the leap, or let doubt guide him back into obscurity? The air hung thick with anticipation, both exhilarating and terrifying as they stepped into a future uncertain, bound together by fate and the weight of profound choices still ahead. Tanner stood before Lila, thoughts racing as the moment stretched, the world around them fading into a blur. He felt an avalanche of potential outcomes crushing down on him. Her acceptance, skepticism, or outright rejection could redefine the path of not only their relationship, but also his future. "Sure, let us talk," Lila replied, her voice warm yet shrouded in curiosity. They made their way to a secluded bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, a place where laughter had often mingled with lessons over the years. This was a sanctuary, but today it felt like the precipice of a steep cliff. He took a deep breath, tasting the bittersweet mixture of anxiety and hope. "I've been thinking a lot about the bet with Carter. It's about more than just the ranch. I want to approach the town to propose an educational project that revitalizes Cedar Creek." He began, gauging her response as he spoke. Lila's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of intrigue sparkling in her eyes. "What kind of project?" she asked, her tone cautious but engaged. "It would blend agricultural practices with sustainability initiatives, creating a space for learning hands-on workshops for adults and kids alike. We can involve local artists and educators, invite families to engage with the land differently. It could be a way to celebrate this place, he articulated, drawing on the vision that had crystallized in his mind. Sounds ambitious, she said, tapping her fingers against the bench, contemplating. He could feel her processing the enormity of the idea, perhaps even recognizing the challenges that accompanied such aspirations. Maybe too ambitious, Tanner admitted, self-doubt surfacing with a vengeance. But I believe it can work, Lila. We'll need the town as support, and your expertise could make the difference. Her expression softened, and he seized the opportunity to press on. I can't do this alone. I don't just want to regain what I've lost. I want something meaningful. I don't want to wager the ranch without a plan that benefits everyone involved, especially us. Us? She echoed, the slight hesitation in her voice forcing him to confront the connection hanging in the air between them. The past few months had transformed their friendship into something deeper, and the thought made his heart race. Yes, us. I want you with me in this. He could feel the weight of those words, knowing how risky it was to intertwine their ambitions with personal feelings. Would she see this as a chance for collaboration, or would it blur the lines of friendship? Lila took a moment to gather her thoughts. Tanner, I admire your passion, but what about the odds? Carter is a fierce competitor. He won't back down easily, and the townsfolk might not see the value in a project like this. Her directness stung. He knew she was right. I'm aware of the risks, but I can't let fear dictate my choices anymore. I want to be proactive, transform this bet into a symbol of hope instead of a lost cause. The intensity of her gaze pierced him. Even if that means confronting Carter head-on, you're not just risking the ranch, Tanner. You're risking yourself. Then let us take the risk together, he replied, a spark igniting within him. What if this is our chance to change the narrative? Not just for me, but also for the town? She seemed to ponder his words, her eyes reflecting both admiration and concern. Tanner held his breath, the moment hanging between them, teetering on the edge of clarity and ambiguity. Would she step into the uncertain future with him, risking everything, or would she refrain from engaging in this gamble? Just as Lila opened her mouth to respond, a shout rang out from nearby, shattering the delicate tension. The sounds of laughter and playful shouting from the children pierced through their earnest exchange, a poignant reminder that the world spun on, oblivious to their struggles. For a fleeting moment, Tanner's resolve faltered, grappling with the enormity of what lay ahead. He had laid his youthful dreams and vulnerability bare before her. But would it be enough to ignite a shared vision? What if we fail? Lila finally said, her voice softer now, folded with uncertainty. Tanner's heart raced. What if we don't? The weight hung thin before them, crackling with unexplored potential. The moment of decision pressed upon them as they both stared into the unknown, contemplating every risk and reward in this intertwined journey. The sound of the children faded again, pulling them back into a world filled with decisions yet to be made. Tanner could feel the outlines of their future sharpening and softening with the gravity of each exchange. Would this conversation mark the turning point for his ambitions? And for the two of them, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, anticipation curled within him like a living thing. This was only the beginning, but Tanner knew the stakes were rising far beyond a single bet, and the tension unraveled before him like an open road leading to the horizon. The future lay tantalizingly just beyond their reach. Would they have the courage to seize it together? The murmur of laughter faded, and Tanner felt the reality reassert itself, tugging at him from an invisible chain that wrapped around his heart. The moment they shared beneath the oak was crystallized in his mind, a fragile combination of dreams and fears. He needed to know how to follow through with his intentions or risk losing everything he yearned for. Let us not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to lay out a plan, he said, his voice steadier now, the initial tremor of trepidation beginning to dissolve into a sense of purpose. Lila nodded, but there was still a shadow of hesitation clouding her eyes. All right, but you need to be prepared. It won't be easy convincing the town or facing Carter. He has influence. Her words pierced Tanner's resolve, yet they sparked something within him, a hatred for the inertia that had kept him shackled for too long. I've been sidelined by my own doubts long enough. If I plan properly and bring stakeholders in, maybe we can shift the narrative. If we do this right, the community could see its value. He drew a deep breath, his mind racing ahead, envisioning the mechanics of his plan. He would need to outline clear objectives, engage local businesses, and build partnerships with educational entities. But the most important connection lay directly before him. Lila, I really need you on board with this. Your experience with educational programs could make it viable. She glanced away, considering the weight of his proposition. This will require total commitment, she replied, her voice firm. Are you willing to dedicate yourself to something that could fail? That question hung heavily in the air like storm clouds. Did he have the tenacity she was asking for? He searched for the answer within himself, recalling the dedication he had poured into the ranch, the sacrifices made for its upkeep, the dreams that had fueled his purpose. I have to try, he responded, the words echoing deeper than the vow he had made to himself. If we can create something that unites people around a common goal, even amidst our struggles, that's worth everything. It's a throwback to what Cedar Creek represents. Lila's gaze locked with his, a mixture of admiration and skepticism dancing in its depths. What would that unity look like in practice? He envisioned families gathering for workshops, laughter mingling with shared learning experiences, children discovering the joy of tilling the soil, and adults forging new paths through cooperation. It's doing good work together, fostering understanding, sparking a community resurgence. It can be healing for everyone. We're not just building an educational project, but reestablishing relationships. A noble cause, she said, but there was no sweetness behind the words, only the weight of reality. But can you see the challenges? Carter wants to win. He thrives on competing, and he wants to concede easily, especially if he sees others rallying in response to your idea. Tanner's heart raced at her blunt honesty, each word a reminder of the uphill battle he was about to face. I'm not afraid of competition, Lila. If it's important enough, I'll face him despite the odds. I need to know that whatever the outcome, I did my part. His determination shifted the air between them, the tension morphing into something palpable, an unvoiced understanding of ambition and risk. This was not just about the ranch anymore. It was about him proving to himself more than anyone else what lay within his heart, a desire to contribute something lasting. All right, she finally conceded, her voice unfurling like petals after rain. I'm in, but we must create a solid plan. We can't just throw ideas into the ether and expect them to stick. Feeling the warmth of her acceptance surge through him, Tanner nodded, heart buoyed by their collective pledge. He sensed the path ahead would carve into unfamiliar territory, forcing him to relearn resilience and how to lead. As dusk approached, they crafted a blueprint of ideas, outlining essentials for their plan, community meetings defining roles, establishing timelines. Each stroke of pen on paper felt invigorating, a testament to emerging growth, as Tanner realized that this venture wasn't solely a path to win back the ranch. It was a vital journey of self-discovery. There's one last thing, he said, pausing as another wave of reality crashed over him. Carter 1T, just see this project. He LLC me. If he challenges me, it could get ugly fast. Lila's eyes narrowed slightly. Then the time has come to face him. You cannot let fear mute your voice. Shtantal, Tana. His breath caught in his throat, the challenge palpable just as silence fell around them once more. Would he be ready when the moment came? Tanner felt the shadows of doubt flicker, but beneath it, a fierce ember burned bright. He was ready to confront everything, including himself. But as they strategized into the night, he couldn't shake the feeling time was running out, and with every plan made, the specter of Carter loomed larger in the distance. Would he be the first to strike when the moment arrived? The sun slipped below the horizon, draping Cedar Creek in deep blues and purples, a palette that seemed to foreshadow the challenge ahead. Tanner left the warmth of Lila's kitchen, heart racing, his mind a flurry of thoughts. The oak tree where they often met felt strangely comforting now, a silent witness to his growth. But as he walked past it, he could not ignore the gnawing fear curling at the edges of his resolve. His breath came out in shaky puffs as he rummaged through the strategies sketched in his mind, feeling their weight pressing against his chest. What if his preparation wasn't enough? What if he faltered when faced with Carter's intimidating demeanor? The voice inside him whispered doubts, but Tanner fought to keep it at bay. He was no longer just a caretaker of the ranch. He was a man on a mission to redefine his purpose and reclaim his destiny. The next morning dawned cool and brisk, the crisp air invigorating, nudging him toward action. He headed to the local diner, his thoughts swirling around who to approach first. Tanner needed a network of support. He could not face Carter or the town alone. Each connection held potential. Everyone seemed to have their own stake in Cedar Creek's future. Inside the diner, the familiar scent of coffee filled the air, mingling with the sizzling of bacon. Taking a seat at the counter, he noticed Ruth, a longtime business owner with roots deep in the community. They exchanged pleasantries, and as they talked, Tanner felt a growing confidence. He shared snippets of his thoughts, and while Ruth listened intently, he gauged the curiosity in her eyes transform into something more interest. Why not invest in something our kids can learn from? He proposed, watching as her brows knitted together in thought. Imagine workshops in agriculture, not just for children, but for the entire town. It could break the mold we've been stuck in. Ruth paused, contemplating. You're aiming high, Tanner, but that could stir up some trouble. You know, Carter won't just sit back while you try to revitalize the community. The mention of Carter tightened Tanner's stomach. I know, but can't you see how fragile our situation is? If I don't act, then we'll be left here in the shadows. Cedar Creek deserves better than that. Ruth's expression shifted. The flicker of hope settled into her heart, igniting the possibility she and T realized she craved. All right, count me in if you can pull together a plan that speaks to the people. He felt the warmth of determination swell. It was the first domino he needed to fall. Ruth merely represented one connection among many, and with every conversation with an ally, he could feel the chains of hesitation begin to fray. He exchanged numbers, eager to build on this new alliance. Days passed, and Tanner relentlessly pursued more partnerships, talking to businesses, school officials, and parents. Each encounter slowly chipped away at the uncertainty, revealing a growing network of supporters. His confidence was finding its footing, transforming his fear into a forward momentum. But with every connection established, the anticipation of facing Carter loomed larger. It was like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon, a reminder that the confrontation was inevitable. Tanner's heart raced at the thought. He felt vulnerable, yet stronger in his resolve with every new voice he gathered behind him. He stood on the edge of Cedar Creek one evening, watching the sun set, a vivid burst of orange and gold. The horizon stretched before him, awash with untapped potential. He had taken steps into the unknown, evolved beyond the shackles of his own insecurities, but now he faced the fork in the road. Would he stand his ground against Carter when the time came? Or would he retreat to the safety of obscurity? The thrill of his newfound purpose coursed through him, battling the frayed edges of anxiety. Tanner clenched his fists, the uncertain air thick with expectation. The moment of truth was approaching, and he was on the verge of discovering whether the man he was becoming could confront the apex of his fears. But he had to make a choice first. Would he allow himself to be crushed by those long-standing fears, or would he rise to embrace the challenges ahead, ready to fight for what he believed? The room for doubt was closing, and Tanner knew the time had come to prepare for battle. As he set out to lay the groundwork for the forthcoming confrontation, a nagging question remained. Could a single encounter truly alter the course of his entire life? The day had finally arrived, the air thick with tension and possibility. Tanner awoke early, barely sleeping the night before, his dreams tangled with images of the upcoming confrontation. Getting out of bed felt like stepping into quicksand. Each movement demanded more energy than he had. He needed this meeting with Carter to propel his plans forward. The stakes had escalated, and the desire to actualize his vision for Cedar Creek purred in the background of his thoughts. After a quick breakfast, he grabbed his notebook, filled with sketches of workshops, community initiatives, and lists of potential allies. This was more than just paper. It was a lifeline. The warmth of the sunlight streaming through the window steadied his resolve. Each ray illuminated the path ahead, dispersing the shadows of doubt. Tanner was ready to take a stand, even if it threatened to unravel the delicate progress he'd made. Arriving at the town hall, the bustling noise echoed around him, laden with voices that ranged from supportive to skeptical. He spotted familiar faces. The encouraging nods from Ruth and a few others bolstered his spirits. Still, the anxiety that clutched at him was suffocating. Tanner took a moment to breathe deeply, recalling the burst of hope he had seen in Ruth's eyes, the chance they had together to rebuild a future. He imagined what it would mean for all of Cedar Creek if he could sway the discussion in his favor. As he entered the makeshift chamber, the atmosphere shifted, pulsating with the gravity of the moment. Tanner's heart syncopated with the tension in the room as he took a seat. Eyes scanned the gathering, and then they landed on Carter. The man held an air of palpable authority, the type that could further inflame or douse a fire. Tanner's hands trembled slightly, but he clenched them together, a silent reminder of the power of intention. Then the meeting began, and Carter's voice rang out commanding yet arrogant, dismissive of the very ideas Tanner had painstakingly established. This town doesn't need some pie-in-the-sky ideas. We can't waste time on frivolities, he sneered, drawing a murmur of agreement from others. Tanner felt his stomach twist, but he willed himself to remain composed. This was a test, not just of his initiatives, but of his own self-worth. Every critical remark from Carter landed like a punch. Inside, Tanner grappled with the impulse to withdraw. Maybe he was overreaching. Yet, he remembered Ruth's flicker of hope, the promise he had made to himself. With each heartbeat reinforcing his conviction, he rose. Cedar Creek deserves more than surviving. We can thrive. The room fell silent, attention shifting to him. Imagine workshops where kids learn agriculture, giving them skills to reshape our economy. Couldn't we invest in a future that's vibrant rather than just maintain a past that's fading? Carter's eyes narrowed. And who is going to fund your little projects? Dreams don't build themselves, he countered, rebuttal ready on his tongue, dismissing the validity of Tanner's growing network of supporters. Together, we can find the resources, Tanner pressed on, confidence unfurling in his chest like a blooming flower. It's not just about funding, it's about engagement. I have a list of business partners and parents supporting this vision. We can change the narrative. The despair doesn't have to define us. The rest of the room, despite some skepticism, began to murmur. Their interest peaked. This was not merely Tanner versus Carter anymore. It had transformed into something larger, a debate over the future of Cedar Creek itself. At that moment, he felt himself ignite, an awareness dawning that what he was building wasn't just about the workshops, but community identity. Every ounce of his determination surged forward. But he needed to keep pressing. I'm inviting all of you to see the potential. We can't afford to let fear dictate our choices. That has been the chains binding us. In an instant, he felt a rush of energy, both terrifying and intoxicating. Carter recoiled from this unexpected push as if stung. It became clear that Tanner could not only challenge the narrative, but could also redefine the role he played in his own life. As he delivered the heart of his argument, Tanner could sense that something monumental was shifting not only within himself, but in the very air around Cedar Creek. It wasn't just about voicing an opinion. He was asserting his presence and carving out a new space for himself. But would this rallying cry to his community be enough to spark a change in their collective mindset? Would Carter concede, or would he fight back with the ferocity of a cornered wolf? As Tanner awaited the inevitable counter-assault, a single thought loomed large in his mind. This moment had the power to change everything. Everything hung in balance, and he wondered if he truly had the resolve to carry the weight of Cedar Creek's future on his shoulders. The silence in the room felt suffocating, each moment stretching like a taut wire. Tanner could sense Carter gathering himself, preparing to lash out. A low growl echoed from the other side of the dais. "You think you can sway everyone with just optimism?" Carter's derision sliced through Tanner's moment of clarity. "We need tangible solutions, not tales of grandeur." The jab landed hard, and Tanner felt the air compress as doubt murmured in his mind. Was he an idealist clinging to illusions? Yet, he closed his eyes momentarily, allowing the flicker of hope from Ruth's face to revive his spirit. No, he was not just an idealist. He was an agent of change, and he could no longer afford to back down. "Carter, if we wait for the perfect conditions, we'll be left with nothing but a ghost town," Tanner shot back, voice steady but urgent. It was liberating to feel the fire within stir, propelling him to respond rather than retreat. This isn't about spoon-feeding ideas to people. It's about inspiring them to take charge of their fate. He noticed a few nods in the audience. The shift was subtle and affirmation rooted in collective frustration over their current stagnation. Tanner realized he wasn't just fighting against Carter. He was advocating for a vision that resonated deeply with the townsfolk. "Tanner," someone from the back interjected, "how do we know your ideas will actually work? Talk is easy, but what's the plan?" It was another challenge, and it stung, but it also presented an opportunity. "Great question," Tanner replied, adopting a more collaborative tone, a strategy forming in the recesses of his mind. "I have outlined specific, actionable steps. It begins with establishing partnerships with local businesses willing to invest in our youth. Think about it, every dollar invested in education here pays back manifold in community growth and economic stability." Carter rolled his eyes, but seemed less certain this time. There was a ripple in the room, uncertainty creeping into the crowd as they began to weigh the potential. Tanner pressed on, counting on the building momentum. "We can pilot one program a trial run. If it succeeds, it could lay the groundwork for larger initiatives. If not, we reevaluate and improve. It's not about risking blindly. It's about testing the waters." The murmurs of agreement began to swell, and Tanner felt buoyed, yet there was still a knot of apprehension in his gut. The unfamiliarity of standing at the forefront made him hyper-aware of every element in the room. He pivoted slightly to address the growing crowd directly, embodying the change he envisioned. "Let us start small workshops in our local parks, where our kids can learn through hands-on experiences. We can connect them with mentors ready to share their skills. This isn't just my vision, it's ours, and we can build it together." Carter bristled, the weight of Tanner's vision undermining his authority. "You think these businesses will just jump at the chance? You'll have to do a lot of persuading." "Sure, I will," Tanner replied firmly, feeling the determination inflating like a balloon. "But I've already reached out. They want to see Cedar Creek succeed just as much as we do. The question isn't whether they help, it's whether we'll act." There was that flicker of inspiration he sought, igniting a sense of agency within the audience. As his words took flight, Tanner's vision crystallized. He was leading a movement, not simply a project. And yet, beneath it all remained a lurking dread. What if it all crumbled? What if he was still just a man playing at leadership without the authenticity of experience? What if failure came to define him rather than the potential for success? As Tanner gazed into the audience, he saw hope mingling with skepticism. Would it be enough to change the tides in Cedar Creek? The air hung heavy with potential, and he felt the responsibility coiling around him. He knew he had to tap deeper into his resolve. "I'm asking for your trust," he implored, locking eyes with Ruth once more, seeking her belief amid the uncertainty. "Trust that. We can steer this ship together." But as the murmurs of contemplation bounced around, ready to take his plea seriously, he felt a shift in Carter, a dangerous, calculated shift. The question now tugging at him was simple. How far would Carter go to maintain control? With the stakes higher than ever, Tanner braced himself for the waves that would come crashing in as the resolution of this conflict loomed just over the horizon. Tanner's heart raced as he stood before the audience, their shifting expressions mirroring the tumult within him. The tension crackled in the air, each second stretching unbearably. Carter's calculated disdain was now palpable. It loomed like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury. But Tanner was no longer paralyzed by self-doubt. Instead, a sense of empowerment surged through him, a conviction that this moment could be transformational. "Let us take charge of our future together," he reiterated, reinforcing his plea. "We can turn Cedar Creek into a beacon of innovation and opportunity." His voice wavered, but he steadied himself. He needed to convince them not just with words, but with conviction. A few voices chimed in, validating the collective frustration that hung in the air. "But what if it doesn't work, Tanner? What if we fail?" An older woman challenged, her brow furrowed with concern. "And if we don't try?" He countered, allowing the question to settle. "Stagnation will leave us with nothing. We owe it to ourselves to at least attempt something new." The murmurs intensified. He could sense a turning tide, but deep inside, the gnawing uncertainty refused to fade away. What if his plans unleashed more chaos than stability? What if Ruth's faith in him crumbled under the weight of his ambition? Just as he felt he was gaining ground, Carter interjected, his voice slick with scorn. "You think just because you've got a couple of local businesses on board, everything will magically fall into place?" Carter's taunt felt like a knife, and Tanner's composure flickered. He inhaled deeply, anchoring himself in the reality that challenges were a part of leadership. "It's not about magic, Carter. It's about belief. Belief in our resilience and potential to adapt and grow." The audience hesitated, and Tanner seized the moment. "We don't need grand plans to start," he pressed, pacing subtly to engage everyone. "We can begin with a simple workshop this summer, invite local artisans to teach skills, create a vibrant community space that nurtures talent. Who knows what could blossom from that?" His approach felt different, shifting from abstract schemes to tangible, shared experiences. He faced Carter once more, who seemed momentarily caught off guard. If Tanner could turn this confrontation into a catalyst for collaboration, perhaps he could shift perceptions entirely. "You're not addressing the real issue," Carter responded, anger simmering beneath his calm facade. "You need to convince people not just to hope, but to act. You think their admiration for your vision will drive them? You're mistaken." Tanner grappled with the accusation. Was he merely an idealistic dreamer? The thought sent ripples of doubt through his core. The reality was painful. Convincing people required more than just faith. It demanded follow-through, accountability, and measurable results. He turned back to the audience, breathing in the collective uncertainty. "Carter's right about one thing," Tanner began, his tone shifting to harness the confrontation as a tread toward transparency. "We'll need metrics, community buy-in, and probably several attempts before we find the right formula. But the first step is to take this leap. If we falter, we'll learn. If we succeed, we'll have laid a foundation for something much greater." The crowd murmured again, and Tanner felt energy shifting. It was subtle, like sparks igniting in dry grass, a realization that their shared stories could weave together into a stronger narrative. Yet, a darker shadow lingered. Carter's expression had morphed into one of simmering determination. Tanner could sense that he would not back down easily. "The clock is ticking, Tanner," Carter hissed, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "What will you do when your plans come crashing down? Will you accept responsibility then?" That question echoed in Tanner's mind, igniting an internal debate. He recognized it was not merely the town at stake, but also his very sense of self, his identity as a leader. Would he shoulder the burden of failure, or find a way to turn it into an opportunity for growth? Time stood still as Tanner faced Carter, the stakes rising with each breath he took. The challenge hung in the air, a battle of wills on the cusp of eruption. As Tanner considered his next move, his thoughts spiraled a collision of courage and fear. What was he truly willing to sacrifice to make this vision come alive? Would he dare to wager everything he had on a flicker of hope amid the tumult? The weight of that question pressed against him, the answers still obscured as the tension tightened. A choice was looming, and the outcome might change not just Cedar Creek, but the very man Tanner thought he had become. Tanner's breath felt staggered, each inhale a fleeting attempt to steady the ground beneath him. The crowd's energy shifted at his resolute front. Yet even in that moment of connection, fear grazed the edges of his resolve. Carter stood unshaken, the epitome of calm confidence, his disdain like a shield against the rising tide of Tanner's newfound determination. "I accept the responsibility," Tanner declared, his words sounding bold even to his own ears. "And I will find a way to make it work." The statement itself felt like both a breakthrough and a challenge, one that bore the weight of possibility and threat all at once. Acceptance fluttered inside him as hope clashed with uncertainty. The very foundation of his identity trembled in the presence of that looming question. There was no turning back. His ambition was out in the open now, digested under critical scrutiny. Yet for the first time, Tanner reveled in this vulnerability. He was alive in the moment, dodging the shackles of his earlier doubts. Conviction, both vulnerable and fierce, coursed through him with new fervor. Carter narrowed his eyes, resigned to a conflict that had become personal. "Let us see how long that resolve holds," he taunted, infusing a sinister undercurrent into his words. Preserving a facade of calm, Tanner sensed the real threat lurking behind Carter's mockery. This battle was not merely one of ideas, but a war of belief of Tanner's capabilities as a leader against the antagonism of a rival unwilling to yield. The meeting ended, the air still thick with unresolved complications as he left the podium. Waves of fatigue washed over him, but gradually, motivation surged in its place. Within the shadows that whispered doubts, determination began igniting sparks of clarity. He recalled every veteran's tale of perseverance, stories infused with grit and the veiled beauty of hard-earned victories. If he had the power to kickstart transformation, he intended to embrace it. The next day, Tanner sat at a table cluttered with notes in Ruth's cozy cafe. Employing the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, he flung open his notebook and plunged into brainstorming. Each idea, inked upon the page, mirrored the flurry of thoughts that twirled in his mind. Workshops, artisan showcases, mentorship opportunities, small yet tangible endeavors that could shift Cedar Creek from inertia to a realm of renewed vibrancy. His phone buzzed, jarring him from concentration. It was a message from Ruth, her endless support flickering through the screen. "I'm proud of you. You're never alone in this." Her words settled around him like a soft quilt, but Tanner quickly reprimanded himself for leaning too heavily on her belief. This journey demanded resilience, bravado, and calculation, an opportunity for self-discovery that reached deeper than any other he had faced. Pacing between his brainstorming and the cafe counter, he committed to reaching out to local artisans, to mesh their skills into something greater. Connecting with each craftsman, gathering feedback on his vision would morph the idea from solitary ambition to community endeavor. The challenge lay in not just convincing them, but also aligning their expectations with his growing aspiration, an artful dance of collaboration. Days rolled by, and not all engagements sparked immediate interest. Some artisans turned away, citing the risks involved, others merely dismissing his novel ideas. Each rejection felt like a stone thrown against his resolve. Yet as Tanner mulled over these moments, he noticed a newfound resilience developing within him. Each setback became a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Then came a breakthrough, a call from a local potter who, intrigued by Tanner's vision, expressed willingness to lead a workshop on creating ceramics. Excitement flooded through Tanner as the first ember of collaboration ignited. This was more than just an event. It signified a potential pathway for others to follow. But as the days turned into weeks and momentum gained traction, Carter's presence loomed larger than before, like a specter intent on unraveling Tanner's progress. What would he do next? Would the path to realizing his vision streamline, or would new obstacles come to test his commitment more than ever? Tanner shifted uneasily as the heightened stakes approached. Unsure of what decisions awaited him on the horizon, he had ignited the journey, But now, Tanner anticipated the tipping point, the moment to confront not just Carter's ridicule, but the deepest uncertainties stirring in his heart. The true challenge was yet to come. Would this venture truly reflect the man he was meant to be? Tanner Wells stood on the ridge of his family ranch, surveying the sprawling fields that had been his heritage for generations. The bright sun illuminated the long shadows cast by the mountains, and he could feel the weight of Cedar Creek as uncertainty lifting ever so slightly from his shoulders. After weeks of toil, despite Carter's relentless intimidation, the momentum Tanner had cultivated began to dissolve the doubts that had clouded his vision. This was not just about reclaiming the past. It was about shaping the future as he prepared for the community meeting that would determine the fate of his proposed educational project. Tanner reflected on how far he had come. No longer just the anxious cowboy fearing for his land. He had transformed into an advocate for change, ready to rally the community around a shared vision of hope. The auditorium brimmed with familiar faces, both allies and dissenters. When Tanner stepped to the front, he was met with a blend of expectation and skepticism. He took a deep breath. Welcoming the energy in the room, this was his chance to solidify the connections he had forged. "Thank you for coming," Tanner began, steadying his gaze across the audience. "Today we stand at a crossroads, not just for our beloved Cedar Creek, but for ourselves. I invite you to think about the legacy we leave for our children." He paced slightly, feeling the ground beneath him, a solid reminder of the land, the history that connected them all. With every word, Tanner articulated the foundations of his plan, the workshops, the artisans, the fresh possibilities they all could initiate together. He flashed back to moments of doubt when he questioned the feasibility of his ideas, the critical voices still echoing in his mind. But each challenge fueled his resolve, and he channeled that spirit into his words. It's not just about agriculture or skills. It's about community. It's about healing and growth. We can empower ourselves by cultivating a culture of learning. The murmur of agreement spread through the crowd, but amidst it, Tanner spotted Carter's sardonic expression, a specter waiting to undermine him. Confidence surged within. This was his moment to confront that specter. "Carter, I know you have concerns about practicality," he stated, gesturing toward his rival. "But what's the alternative? We continue facing the same issues year after year, never daring to look beyond our fears." Carter's face darkened, and the tension in the room thickened. "Dreams are one thing, Tanner. Action is another," he shot back, a hint of malice lacing his tone. The challenge was clear, and Tanner felt the pressure rise. "I agree," Tanner replied, earnestness crystallizing his resolve. "That's why I've already engaged local businesses, and I'm ready to draft plans with tangible metrics. Every potential workshop, every partnership will be assessed for success. We'll adapt, we'll learn, and we'll grow. Isn't that worth a shot?" Silence hung palpably for a moment. Then nods began to ripple. The crowd was leaning in, their interest piqued by his transformation from a man beleaguered by doubt to someone who embraced vulnerability as a catalyst for strength. It was exhilarating, he realized. Behind him lay a trail of rejection, setbacks, and moments where he almost gave in. But in that hall, he was embodying the very evolution he wished to inspire. As Tanner concluded with a rallying cry, an unexpected clarity washed over him. Together, we can not only revive Cedar Creek, we can redefine its identity. This isn't just my journey, it is ours. The applause that followed echoed with a thunderous appreciation. Each clap pulsated through Tanner's veins, fueling the solid confidence that surged within him. He had accomplished something tangible. He had constructed a community around his vision, no longer an isolated fight for survival, but a collective healing process. Moments later, he stepped down, heart racing not out of fear, but from exhilaration as Lila approached him. "I believed in you," she said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You've grown so much. I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, the warmth of gratitude washing over him. For Tanner, the journey was no longer defined by competition or loss, but by building something greater than himself. He had proved that courage was rooted in vulnerability and growth stemmed from authentic connections. As Tanner emerged into the sunlight once again, he felt a sense of wholeness across roads now fully navigated. They would confront Carter together, prepared to defend their shared future with tenacity. The stakes would always exist, but Tanner knew instinctively that he could face whatever was to come. This was his achievement, grounded in resilience and intertwined with a community that was finally ready to reclaim its legacy. Cedar Creek was more than land. It was a living testament to growth, unearthing the potential that lay buried beneath the fears of its inhabitants. Now was the time to act, and in that realization, Tanner Wells had fully become the man he was always meant to be. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories, unfolding new perspectives on overcoming life as trials. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, helping this inspiring message reach even more people. Comment with your reactions and theories about Tanner's journey. Every voice matters in shaping our conversation around growth and resilience. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread this message of personal achievement and communal revival. Your support makes all the difference.